he was a bad man.
Yes.
And so they thought that the only problem really was King George. So we have to break away from King George and establish our own king.
Right.
Well, fortunately, the men that were drafting the Constitution,
Yes.
the Jeffersons and the Hamiltons and the Washingtons of the period, were extraordinarily wise.
Yeah.
It was a most amazing thing that those men who were being given an opportunity to become a new royalty
Sure.
in this country, not only an opportunity, but the people were clamoring for it, they said no. They said this is not a question of good versus bad men. This is a question of the system. This is the question of the laws or the concept of government. And so they, for the first time in history, drafted a form of government which started to put limitations on the power of the rulers. It's the first time that it had ever been done from the ground up.
So the Declaration of Independence basically was saying all the things wrong with King George III, and Mr. King George III was a collectivist, was he not?
He was a collectivist, but those were still the days where governments ruled primarily by force of arms. That was at the time in history when there was a change being made right after the French Revolution and after the Magna Carta, where the concept of the voice of the individual citizen being important, that was just beginning to surface. And from that point forward in history, of course, it has grown quite a bit. Prior to that, it was just force of arms. If you had a bigger army than the next guy, you were in charge. And the people accepted that. That was just the way it was. They didn't have any idea of self-rule at all. Well, with the advent of the French Revolution and the American Revolution primarily, this really began to change rapidly. And so King George was a collectivist, yes, because even then there were certain aspects of having to obtain the consent of the ruling class, and there was a substantial middle industrial class in England. And already the government was having to be responsive to the will of the people to some extent, which means they had to engineer public opinion. And when you start engineering public opinion, that's when you get into the area of saying, well, we're doing this because of that reason, and you have to come up with a good reason. And the best reason of all is for the greater good of the greater number.
When people stop thinking and stop caring, is that a breeding ground for collectivism?
I think that is not the breeding ground. I think that's the result of it. I think that is what you find as a symptom of it, not the cause of it. People stop caring because they've been told it doesn't make any difference. And not only doesn't make any difference, they're not important anyway. They could be sacrificed for the greater good of the greater number. So they're taught to focus only on the big picture, society, the future of mankind, and they themselves consider that they are dispensable. I think it's a symptom rather than a cause.